I wanted to create a simple art journal page today, and when I don't know what I want to create, I always fall back on prompts. And so I decided to pull out the Get Messy prompt deck today and just pull a few cards at random to use that as a way to guide what I was going to create today. So if you haven't seen this before, I featured it in a previous video. I was actually one of the artists featured within this prompt deck. I'll leave a link down below if you're interested in getting one of these decks for yourself, but let's take a look at the prompt cards that I've picked at random. So I decided to pull 3 different cards, and I think having a few different ones at once really helps to give me a bit of a starting point. So the first one was to add some paper with text on it. The second was to turn something on your desk into a symbol and make a repeating pattern. And the third was stencil, bought, or homemade. So these were not that far out of my comfort zone as far as they could have been. I promise they were completely random, but I just really enjoy this because, like I said, it gives me something to start with. So I can sit down at my journal and go, okay, I'm going to use this set of supplies and see what I can create. So it does kind of have that bit of constraint around it as well, where it's really forcing you to think about how you can be creative and how you can approach different things. So I grabbed one of my stencils. I, of course, had some text book pages on hand, so that was an easy one for me. But in terms of the symbol of something on your desk and turning it into a repeating pattern, that was something that you'll notice as I show you the process of this page. I actually left until the last thing that I did because I really wasn't sure how I wanted to approach that. I had this piece of like lace ribbon on my desk, and so I picked that up and thought, maybe that can inspire some sort of pattern, and you'll see how I end up including it on the page. And it was really very subtle in terms of how it influenced my mark making, but it was still a fun exercise, I think, just to prompt me to think about how I wanted to approach the page. So, given that we're starting with book text here, I used that as my background, and I just decided to cover the entire page in this. So, normally in my collages, I'll do a mix of different papers. So, I will include like book text like this, but I'll also include, plain paper, so maybe like tea dyed paper and also brown paper and all manner of different things. So I kind of decided to strip it back in that sense and just use the book text as the background. I did come in with a piece of tea dyed paper just so that I had a little bit of negative space, because otherwise the page would have felt very busy, I think. But I just decided to work on the left hand side of the page here. And in case you're wondering about the journal that I'm working in here, this is a passport traveler's notebook. So I just have the passport insert inside this. It's just a sort of plain, like cream ivory insert for that. And it's one of many journals that I have on the go, which I feel like lots of you can probably relate to the fact that I have many journals on the go. I've got this one, I've got my altered book, I've got my paint sample journal, I've got all sorts of different ones. I've got my Christmas one that I've been working on. So I feel like it's kind of just fun to go through different formats, because then I can work on different things and different projects. And yeah, I guess it's just that's the way I work. So today we're working in this journal, tomorrow we'll work in a different journal, and then next week we'll make a new one, because we can never have too many journals, right? So for the stenciling portion of this page, I decided to do a bit of a change from just using like normal paint on the stencil, and I chose to use it more as an outline. And I just used one of my pens. This is just a Uniball pen, and I think that it gave quite a nice contrast to the page, but maybe I should have chosen a different design of the stencil, because it does stand out quite a lot. And I think once I added the floral like focal point onto the page, I think that kind of helped to offset it a bit. But it is very much in your face and bold on the page, which maybe is something that I don't normally gravitate towards within my pages, but it was still fun to do something a little bit different here and just experiment with another way that I could use my stencils on my pages, because I feel like I don't use stencils enough on my pages, and so that's something I definitely want to get into more, is different ways to do stencils. Like, I've never really gone into the realm of like embossing and using, what is it called, like modeling paste almost, and so that's something that definitely intrigues me, and I really want to get some of that to use. So rather than using the stencil across the entirety of the page, I just decided to keep it fairly concentrated on the left hand side. And I think that this really helped to balance out the page a lot, especially because, like I said, this was such a bold, like contrasting design against everything else. I think it's because it was just very geometric, I suppose. Like, it wasn't more of a natural stencil, and so I think that's why it sort of stood out a lot more on the page. But I do definitely like the contrast that the black gives to the page, like I said, because otherwise this was a fairly neutral page. I mean, it was really simple anyway, so I wasn't using a huge amount of supplies, but as always, I was keeping it fairly neutral, and my pop of colour came from the botanical illustration that I cut out and added onto this page. I did come in with a bit of white acrylic paint just to soften some of the edges. I felt like it felt a little bit disjointed and almost like bare on the top right of the page. I don't know if it's because I was working just on the left hand side of the page, and normally I do tend to work across both, so I almost have to remind myself, like, we're not going across to the other side of the page, so you need to make sure that, this side of the page looks like a finished page almost. So it's kind of like reprogramming my brain almost to make sure that all my different elements are within this space. But I definitely think it's a good way to come up with different compositions as well, because sometimes I'm definitely guilty of just kind of doing the same thing, which nothing wrong with that, but it is really good to sort of branch out and try different things and experiment with different layouts or different compositions, different materials, etc. So that's kind of what I was trying to do with this page, but I know that I do tend to fall into my same way of creating, which I guess you could call a style, but I do sometimes think that I want to branch out a little bit more, but there's always that balance, isn't there, where I kind of want to branch out enough that it's interesting and enjoyable, and I'm learning new things, but also I still want to stay within the things that I find comforting or the things that I enjoy doing and that still feel like me, because there's always that like stage, isn't there, when you're trying different things and you've not quite found the way to do it that works for you, so you feel like you're doing something completely different, and it's really hard, I think, sometimes not to feel discouraged by that, because I've definitely created pages that I've not posted where I've thought, wow, that's like completely off the rails, not my style at all. And even though I did enjoy some aspects of it, or like there were things I learned, like different techniques, it just felt so detached from my normal art journaling style. And so that's something I'm definitely sort of reckoning with, I suppose, is trying to think how I want to progress artistically, but still create things that I enjoy and that I love. So, when it comes to adding text on a page like this, I will always fall back on my Tombow brush lettering, or I will use some stamping, or I will use my typewriter. There's kind of like three different modes of attack in terms of how I'm going to approach lettering on a page. And so I do try to, mix it up a little bit and introduce different things, and maybe even mix up like You know, some are lettered words and then some have like stamping or typewriters. That can be really fun to mix up the different fonts, but yeah, it's a whole process. So I don't really know what I'm trying to say with the voiceover of this journaling video, but I hope that maybe you find some peace in knowing that just because I'm sharing all of these pages doesn't mean that I don't think about these types of things, and that it's definitely, it's a cliche, but it's definitely that whole journey rather than the destination. It's the process of creating rather than the finished product. So even if I'm not happy with the finished product, I have still enjoyed the process, and that's something I'm trying to remind myself, because I just feel like I'm at a little bit of a crossroads with the things that I'm creating at the moment, and so that's just where I am with my journaling. But I hope you've enjoyed joining me for this journaling video. I do quite like the page, how it turned out in the end. I think just anything with a botanical illustration is something that I'm more prone to liking anyway, but let me know what you've been working on in your journals. I'd love to hear about the different projects that you're working on. Maybe you're joining in with the No So November challenge. I'm really excited to post the second video for that and do the second mini journal. But yeah, I hope you're all well, and I'll see you in the next one.